So the Marathon Server Slam launched, and a lot of the complaints for the game um, were with the UI and the UX in general. Visual aesthetics aside, I think the visual aesthetics are aren't the problem here. I think that's just an opinion, and actually like the bright colors and the clean aesthetic that they're using. The kind of Nerf gun laser tag aesthetic that they're using, and maybe that's the issue, is that it feels like you're playing laser tag when it's actually supposed to be something more serious. But that's a side note. The UI here, there are some kind of, I think, critical issues with the UI, and it varies from, like, the small iconography, which is what people are pointing out. But I think it goes a little deeper than that. And it's nothing that it's not something like game breaking or something like that. It's just something that I'm noticing, and something that I think people aren't pointing out. And I think could be fixed pretty easily. So, one of the first things I'm noticing is something that we call in the UX field information architecture, or IA for short. So, information architecture is essentially how your information is displayed, or how your information is organized, and structured to be presented to the user, right? So that's what we're gonna go into first. So one of the things that I've noticed is the armory sorting, right? So if I go to loadout, and I go to armory, right? So this is where I'm buying things. Um, the way they have it sorted on the left side here, the way they have it sorted is by faction, right? So you're doing contracts for various factions and whatnot. That does not make any sense to me, like, at all, right? And I don't know, this is not something that people are complaining about, but this, as a UX designer, um, this kind of just bothers me. When I come here, I'm looking for a very specific thing, or a collection of things that say, like, oh, hey, that's neat, I might need that. It's never going to be sorted by faction, because I don't know, as a new user, I don't know what each faction offers and how they're going to be different from one another. Right now, they're all the same to me. Some of them offer weapons, some of them offer mods, things like that. But I'm looking over here. I'm looking for, like, different categories to sort them, like how they are on your in your backpack or loadout. So I'm like maybe thinking weapons. I'm looking for a specific weapon they might have for sale, or a specific implant, or different weapon mods or whatever, right? I'm just looking for ammo. I have to search. I have to click on each one of them to find what I need. If I'm looking for a specific, like, sniper rifle, I have to look at all of these guys to see, like, okay, this is like a single shot assault rifle, and then I have to remember that Traxxas has this, right? There's no other way to sort it, I don't think. Um, so that's an example of kind of the wrong information architecture. The information's all here. It's just organized incorrectly. Um, Maybe as an experienced user, I'd come in and, like, I know that Traxxas offers, like, will always offer these kinds of weapons, but there's no real rhyme or reason for them to do this other than just to be unique or something. On the right side, it's cool that they're having their various loadouts here. That's pretty, that makes sense. But my biggest problem with the armory screen is this, and that's the main thing for information architecture. The other thing that I really have a problem with is just, again, it's information architecture, but it's also just discovery of things, right? So if I look at factions and I go into my contracts, right? I have this contract active, right? Um, and in the contract it says in Dire Marsh, right? So I have to read the contract specifically to get the information that I need to be on Dire Marsh. I was in a I was in a match with, and one of my teammates said, you're in the wrong area for your contract. And there is nothing in the UI that tells me that I was in the wrong area. My teammate had to tell me that. So if I go to, I'm supposed to be in Dire Marsh for this contract, and so if I just click perimeter, there's nothing stopping me or alerting me saying, hey, you can't be here, or this you can go here, but your contract will not be fulfilled since there's no objectives in this contract for this in this area. Like a simple fix would just be, adding an icon for your contract um, on the correct area of the map. So like it would be on maybe on the right side of Darmarsh here. There's like a symbol for my specific faction or a contract icon to say like, hey, you should do this here. And there should also be a warning to say like if I'm on the wrong one, it'll say like, do you still want to drop in? Your contract might not be fulfilled if you go here. Your contract, and it should also give me an idea of where I should be, so that I don't have to go back and look at my contract. The information I need for my contract should never be in the block text in the contract. It should just that information should be up front and center, and big, so that it's noticeable and discoverable. And so that's the other thing, and that I think also falls under information architecture. Is like there's not really anything that tells me that I have to be on Dire Marsh, as I just learned that just from my teammates. The other thing too is it's just iconography is just way too small, right? So compared to something like Apex, icons are really small, and it has nothing to do with the visual aesthetic. The visual aesthetic could be the same, but these, I feel like it's just way too small. Some of these icons, and they're too similarly shaped, and can be the same color. So if I bring up like health or whatever, it's like some of the health icons or items could look like, implants or cores as well. They share the same color. So in order for you to familiarize yourself, you have to hover over things, and that takes some time, and you have to do a lot of reading. So I think a fix for that could just be making the icons and the overall visual aesthetic when you're looking at these menus to be bigger, about by 10 or 16 pixels. A lot of these icons are just, I have no idea what these are. There's little icons that on the top corner of that of the box there that tells you what kind of item it is, but even that is just way too small, and the overall box itself is too big or too small, and so I have to really read things. And of course, I'm new to this game. Everyone's new to this game, and that's part of the reason why they don't like the UI. But it's just because they have to get used to it and recognize things. But even then, I think it would be a problem to learn. It just increases the learning curve when the iconography and overall visual aesthetic is so small. So that's kind of weird. Like these two blue things, they look pretty similar, and I have to they're like completely different. So the UI is I think this is what people are complaining. It's just a lot of clutter on the screen. In Marathon, but I think that's just a natural thing in extraction shooters or in most looting games have screens like this where they're like separated, and there's just a bunch of boxes, and it's very very jarring at first glance. Um, Marathon is specifically being targeted, I think, because the iconography is just really small. And like, see these two things? They look very similar, but they're different. Like, I guess they're both consumables, but because they're tiny and small, you have to just hover over them and read them to see what the difference is, and that can take time, and there then becomes a recall issue. But in general, even Arc Raiders, I played that for a couple hours. I found that UI to be very very confusing. So I think that just falls. I think that's just a natural thing in this genre, is to have really, really cluttered UI. Um, but in general, they laid it out. So like here, on the left here, in columns, right? So on the left here is your personal, um, what you have on you, what's equipped on your person, and then your backpack is in the middle, and then on the right here is your vault. They could do better by separating a little bit more, but I think it's a lot at once to get. I think that's what people are complaining about. One of the other things I want to touch on with Marathon is the contracts. So if I go to factions and I select a faction here, this is my contract screen. Okay, in the middle here, these giant cards are contracts, and the contract that I have selected or is active is the middle one here, and it looks like, based on how it's stylized, that my active contract is the one on the left, because that's the one that's drawing my attention to it. That one's inverted in color. That one's got the most contrast to it. This is what we call a primary and secondary power struggle. So in UI, generally, you want to draw the user's attention to the biggest kind of call to action. And I don't know if they're trying to do that here, but it's drawing my attention here when my attention should be in the contract in the middle, because that's the one that's active, right? So the only way I can tell that's active contract is it says here at the bottom active, and then at the top also it says active. Marathon's problem is that it uses text to give really valuable information when it shouldn't be using text. Text is one of the last things you want to do to give the user valuable information. Right when I look at the screen, my active contract should be the one that pops, that gets my attention right away, and should be colored something like this. And I don't know, maybe there's something, I'm new to this game, so maybe there's a reason why this is they want my attention here, maybe, but at the offset I can't tell why, and that's also another problem. If they're trying to make this important, then it needs to be immediately understandable, immediately apparent why this is important, but I don't think that's the case. If I select this one, all that changes is that this now has this active contract text. That's just a little nitpick there, but I think they can do better here. There's just a lot of text, including text that you need to be able to read to see what's important. One thing I have also noticed is that it's pretty difficult to notice or figure out your teammates from one another, or differentiate your teammates from enemies. It's just, they're small icons, and this is something that like you probably would learn as you play the game more. I only have a few hours in the game, but one of my first matches I kept shooting at my teammate thinking that they were enemies, and just because it was just chaotic. There should be a better way, a clearer way to discern your teammates from enemies, and that's just in general. What I find also is because everything you're fighting, or most of the things you're fighting, are bipedal enemies or NPCs in the game. Everything just kind of clumps together as an enemy, whether they're enemy runners or AI, and you just kind of shoot everything. And there's no real way to discern, like, okay, that's definitely AI and that's definitely another human player. And again, this comes down to when you play the game, you'll start to separate the shapes more. But even right now, even after a few hours, it's hard for me to tell. The only way I can tell that something's AI is if they miss really badly, or if you can just detect patterns or whatever. But sometimes the AI can have the same abilities as human players, so it's hard to tell even then. the only real reason you can tell something's a human player is if when you kill them, they just get knocked down and they don't just die immediately. Um, and what that does is it takes away the decision making of whether or not to engage, because if you can't discern between enemy AI and enemy human, you kind of just clump it all together and you start shooting at everything that isn't your teammates, and that kind of takes away part of the gameplay experience that you want to have in an distraction shooter, is to make that decision, is like whether or not to engage, whether or not it's safe to engage, and and kind of strategize a little bit. It takes away that strategy. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on from a UX perspective on Marathon. Um, it could use some improvement, and if you feel like I've missed some things that you wanted me to talk about, um, or you had questions, just let me know in the comments below. Or if there's any other game that you want me to take a look at in terms of its UI or UX, um, I'd be happy to take a look at it and put up a video for that as well. So just let me know what you think, and if I've missed anything, we can have a discussion about it in the comments. Thanks.